Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. A few weeks ago I did a review of issue 1 of the 2016 Joe Book Darkwing Duck series, and I gave it warm praise and a recommend, especially to fans of Darkwing Duck. And then I took a break for a while. I'm actually deliberately trying not to do videos over every comic book I get because I don't want to splurge out too many videos. I tried to find the digital editions of these comics so I could do like a nice podcast format showing you the pictures, but I cannot find the digital editions of this comic anywhere. I don't think they've released it yet. And there's a trade paperback, but I'm also missing a few of the issues from this run. So what I've decided to do is, since I'm digging this series and since it's kind of hard to find it digitally or even you can't even find some of the issues on Midtown Comics. I figured I'm just going to review some more of these stories. We're going to do some old-fashioned storybook time with number one Marmaduke fan. And I'm just going to encourage you guys to go check this out. 100% get this if you love the Darkwing Duck show growing up. But even get this if you were just kind of a casual fan of Darkwing Duck. I think you're going to dig this, and I recommend this for parents of children. Go to your local comic book shop and see if they have some of these in stock, because it didn't sell well and this series has ended. Wah wah. So the time to support this series and let it keep going on has ended, but you could still support a comic book shop and get some great comics for you and for your kids. So when last we left Darkwing Duck, there was a cliffhanger, and since I can't find issue 2, I'll maybe come back to that later if I can find that one. What's nice about these is they're all pretty good self-contained stories. So they explain enough for you to know who some of the new characters are and get me interested to go read some of the other comics, the older comics where they introduce these characters, but this is a good standalone story with some humor. And if you didn't watch Darkwing Duck, it comes off as a little verbose, but the character of Darkwing Duck is a very dramatic prima donna sort of character where he sets himself up to fall flat on his face because he's got a bit of an ego problem, even though he's a really cool, genuine hero who goes through struggles and overcomes bad guys and pretty cool superhero antics. So if you can read this and imagine in your head the voices of the characters from the show, this pretty much just plays like a bonus long lost episode of the TV show in your imagination. So trigger warning, I'm probably going to be doing a awful, horrible, not good, very bad Jim Cummings impression from time to time as I flip through this with you. So Darkwing's looking at his secret files with his adopted daughter Goslin and Honker, who's sort of Goslin's nerdy friend. And Honker's going to help Darkwing organize his files. And as he's reading, he recalls one of his capers, the kitty cat caper, and Darkwing narrates the story to us. And this is a little weird because they're anthropomorphized animal characters, but they also have domestic pets like house cats, and house cats are different from anthropomorphized cats who go to grade school and study math. So the cat who they were experimenting on has disappeared, and Darkwing grabs the note, and it's written in sort of lolcat speak, but it works in the context of this story because it's not teehee random meme. We're so 2012 hip, guys. It works because it's just a funny bit where Darkwing thinks, clearly this is some insidious, indecipherable code, and a little kid could try to read that and figure it out, and they laugh and they feel smart because they're smarter than Darkwing Duck. It works. It works on any level without it just being teehee random meme humor. Darkwing and Launchpad go, and Darkwing decides to go undercover as a hot dog vendor. And Darkwing learns that if you're a hot dog vendor, it's a good idea not to serve your fans a really piping hot dog that burns their hands. He learns not to be mean to the kids he serves hot dogs to, or else the hot dog customers, they might get really annoyed at you, and they might do a nice cartoon hijinks fight with you. Gee, I wonder if there are any lessons that, I don't know, comic book companies could learn from hot dog vendors about treating their fans. Anyway, so Darkwing and Launchpad, I love this. Okay, the consistency of the gags. So most of the gags are verbal, which means I'd have to read them all out and do my horrible voice to make them work. But they combine the verbal gags with visual humor. So most humor, sometimes there'll be like a wah-wah joke, but then there'll be a funny joke again. And I was consistently chuckling throughout this whole book. It keeps a good pace of good jokes in relation to, kind of wah-wah dad humor jokes, in part because the character of Darkwing is a guy who says ridiculous stuff and sometimes doesn't realize he's saying ridiculous stuff. So you're laughing at how he's silly because it's not the silly Billy puns that are selling the humor, it's his over-the-top personality that's helping sell the humor. So he brags about how he's deciphered the code, and then you look at it, and it's all the villains' names are written on it. So that's how we knew that the supervillains wrote this list. And they do a cool bit when they lampshade things. So one of the things that's annoyed me in comics is when a panel is copy and pasted over and over again because it feels frozen. So they do this bit where Goslin interrupts his story, and then Darkwing immediately wants to get back to his story. And then he says, "Take note, LP. No caption, no scene transition, and the artist gets to reuse a panel. Everyone wins." So when they do something like that, they call attention to how silly it is, and they break the fourth wall and make you aware that you're reading a comic book. But they've done it in a way that helps explain the reuse of the panel. Therefore, I forgive it, and I chuckle a bit, because they reused a panel I might not have noticed, but by calling attention to it, it's funny, and then a kid can flip back and forth and say, "Oh yeah, that's the exact same picture." So Darkwing Duck goes into the villains' meeting, and they're watching a pay-per-view show, and it's some sort of a Miss Duckburg beauty contest, and Darkwing gets fascinated, and he watches the whole show with them, and as soon as it ends, there's a big splash page where every villain attacks Darkwing Duck at once. Yes, a climactic, big, over-the-top action scene after the humor that has been building us up to a big action moment. And I love this. He dispatches them all in a cartoony way. Bushroot is worried about the rented room getting destroyed and him having to pay for it. Liquidator says, "Horror's not the quicker soaker-upper." Man, I don't even remember what his voice sounds like in the show. But Darkwing, every single villain that Darkwing takes out, there's a comedic visual gag. Cane sword, he draws the cane sword. It's way too big to fit in the sheath. He slips and falls, and Megavolt does a pun, and then LP roasts Megavolt for his pun, and Darkwing does something smart. He throws the Super Soaker with Liquefier, the water villain, at Megavolt, zap. So this illustrates a point I've already talked about in my first review of issue 1. Darkwing Duck is a goofy character who is also a genuinely cool hero, and those two things can coexist. You can be a little goofy and be set up for a fall, but that's not the same thing as being a silly Billy villain who no one take this stuff seriously. It's just a silly, stupid comic book. He has emotional heart as a hero who wants to do good and to be a good dad, and he actually does some kick-butt stuff in each of these comic adventures. So then he goes, after another interruption, he goes back to telling the story, and he's sort of casting himself as Sherlock Holmes, and there's some of his great... You have to read this in Jim Cummings' voice for it to work. Otherwise, if you just read this, or perhaps some evil genius has come to... Then it's just long and over the top. But if you can picture Jim Cummings' delivery in your head, this starts to sail. Or perhaps some evil genius has come to St. Canard, drawn no doubt to the challenge of matching wits with my extraordinary brain and insurmountable skill. Clearly we are dealing with an ego of epic proportions. Clearly. It works if you love the character and if you've heard the character. But even if a kid hasn't heard this TV show, I think they'd still dig this, because then they know to pull back and not just hit you with a whole bunch of words, but to have a silent moment and then some physical, visual comedy that works well on the comics page. So this is doing a good job of courting fans of the TV show, but recognizing new fans may be coming into this, new young fans. This was great. They revealed the supervillain, and it was Fluffy the house cat the whole time, and his dialogue is written like Sylvester, thupper and thuckatash. And I don't know, that just cracks me up, and then every time he changes his S's into S's and, can't pronounce his S's, it just got funnier and funnier to me. And then they have this cool little fight where Fluffy has prepared a whole army of house cats, and Darkwing gets them all wet with a sprinkler, and they run away from that. It all builds up to a climax where Fluffy gets caught in a street sweeper and ends up getting, what's the word? It's like he just got a bath and he's all fluffy coming out of the bath. So yeah, it works. If you have cats, that kind of thing is really funny. I cannot show the last page, but it sets up the next adventure, and I dug it. Go to a comic book shop, see if they have a few of these lying around. It didn't sell well. Sadly, no digital comics of this yet, but I think I will go back and read some of the older Darkwing Duck comics, which have been made available digitally, and I'm so excited. I knew they made some of these in the 90s because my brother used to read these to me when I was learning how to read, and I found out I haven't been able to find those digitally, but they're pretty cheap to get the originals, so I think I'm going to try to buy up some of the old 1990s Darkwing Duck comics, that the very first ones they published, and relive those. That'll be my first time reading those since I was about 3 or 4 years old. But solid. This was number 5. Go check it out and share it with a young person. I'm number 1 Marmaduke fan. Love you guys, and I'll catch you later.